Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask GMBN Tech. This is where we answer your questions you've put in the comments under our GMBN Tech videos using the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech. So we've picked out some and let's get straight into them. First question today is from Riccardo Petrazzi, who says, is anyone making a tyre drivetrain and would it last better?
Good question. Sneaky 2-in-1 setup, but very good. Essentially, the two big brands aren't making full titanium drivetrains, but there's loads of sub-brands that are. So you could do 5-dev cranks. I believe they do titanium chain rings as well. KMC do a titanium chain. D-Ward, who works closely with Tom Sturdy and makes lots of titanium bits. He's got titanium jockey wheels. So in short on that one, yes, you could go hog wild on titanium bits, and you could get the Crank Brothers pedals, sneak them in there. But yeah, tie axles, tie springs, you can go wild. To come back to the second part of the question, would it last better? Would it last longer? That's much harder to answer because it depends on how many watts you put out. It depends on where you're riding, what conditions, and how much maintenance. Maybe is the best question on that one, but yeah, go hog wild on titanium bits. Have you gone hog wild and blinged out your bike with a tie bolt kit? If you have, let us know in the comments below. We've got a question here from The Thing With It. For a dented rim that's hard to set up tubeless, can I just bend the bead lip back with some pliers, or should I get a new rim?
I think it probably depends on the bend, unfortunately, and the dent. I think you can, which we'll come on to in a minute about how to do that. You don't want to be doing it all the time, I think is the key, because aluminium does weaken quite quickly and become more brittle and prone to cracking.
And I assume that means we think that The Thing With It is running an aluminium rim. Obviously with a carbon rim, if it's bent, don't try and bend that back.
And they don't really dent in the same way, do they, I guess? So talking about aluminium specifically, I think if your rim is maybe single wall or just like an older sort of value rim, you might have more success with being able to bend it because it might have bent more easily in the first place or dented. For a really strong rim, it might be a little bit much to actually try and bend that back. But if you are going to have a go, say maybe you're out riding, you're out a race weekend or something, you have to try and make it work.
Yeah.
What's the best way to go about that?
I guess it loops back to depending on how big a dent is, because if it's just we've got a rim here, maybe it doesn't come up on film, but we'll try anyway. If you've got a small rim profile and it's only a minor dent, then yeah, as long as you can grab it with something to bend it back, something like a adjustable wrench like this would be perfect. And then you can slide it neatly on, make sure it's really tight, and then just slowly work it. But as you were saying about fatigue, obviously it's not something where you want to kind of wangle it back and forth. It's just one smooth motion to get it vaguely straight. And I guess it's just straight enough to seal. And if it's a sealing problem, which The Thing With It has got as well, you could try reapplying the rim tape too, because sometimes I've seen sort of like rim tape lift, and that means you can't quite get enough air in to pop it on the bead. And I guess the classics of making something tubeless is always helpful too. So removing the valve core, really easy with the PT's valves because one of the caps is a valve core removal tool. And that helps boost the airflow and helps pop the tyre into the bead. So even if it's slightly awkward and you've straightened it a bit and it's still not perfect, taking the valve core out can help a lot.
Oh, for actually when you're sealing it.
Yeah.
Would it be if you really can't get it to seal tubeless? And you think, okay, maybe I can just whack a tube in for the ride. Do you think that would be safe, or are you going to like risk blowing the tyre off if you inflate it with a tube? What do you think about that?
I think it depends on how well a job of straightening you've done. So if you've kind of managed to straighten the rim profile so it's fairly square, it should go tubeless. And if it's still not, because maybe there's a flat spot in it, a tube should still work pretty well because that actually holds the bead up against the bead lip of the rim. So it should be good.
So it as an option.
But I guess it's that thing of if you've bent something and you've bent it back, just be mindful it's not going to be as strong because, as you've said before, like you've fatigued it a little bit. So just be mindful.
Cool. Next question today is from Exploring with Caleb, who says on his felt mountain bike, what is the best option for stopping punctures? It's a question that we would love to be able, that's what everyone wants, isn't it?
Well, here's about 5 litres of an answer. Boom. Going tubeless, that is a really quick and easy way to stop lots of punctures, whether they be sort of like the pinch flats where you've got an impact that can damage a tube in a snake bite, or you've got a problem with thorns and things like that. Making sure you've got this stuff and the little wiggly worms. PT's does them, Topeak do them as well, Dynaplug do them as well. So that's the backup if the sealant can't quite do its job. That was hard for me to say.
How much of that should you be using typically if you're measuring it out in your tyres? It's about 100 mil per end, is it?
It sort of depends on tyre size and diameter, because obviously that changes the volume. But lots of brands have got different specs. PT's is quite a healthy amount. I think that's quite good because more is actually better because you're going to lose some as it seals.
Yeah.
So they're saying 120 mil for a 29er and around 90 mil for a 275. So
it is quite a lot, but then
it is, but it'll be in there for a while, and it also is. It's quite liquid, but then it'll sort of like thicken up when it seals around the hole. So that's why you need to run a fair amount of sealant. But each sealant brand will have it slightly differently. So yeah.
Cool, thank you.
We've got a question here from Yuri Telru, which is mixed size brake rotors. Why don't we use bigger discs at the back, since it's the brake we use most of the time and thus it heats up more? We might need more stopping power at the front because the weight transfer is under braking, but I feel my front doesn't heat up as much as my rear. Thoughts?
Oh, I think it's got a good point. I think this is something we see actually maybe in World Cups and that kind of stuff, people running equal size rotors or occasionally a bigger one on the rear, because they do seem to heat up more. This is a well documented thing, you're probably spending more time, especially on a longer descent, so it's not when you're off the brakes, it's just about the direct, like a quick braking force, but it's like you're dragging your brakes more, it's a long track. The rear does heat up more, and that's why you tend to see rear rotors discolouring more often than the front. So using bigger rotor on the rear, maybe thinking about your pads as well. Like if you wanted organic pads on the front, just because of the way that bites, you could have sintered on the rear to try and cool them down a bit. And the other thing is cold, wet conditions. The other way, if you do want to heat them up more, use a smaller rotor, to get it up to heat. So I guess the reason you might spec a bigger one on the front is just so you can have a smaller rotor on the rear for weight saving, which is maybe why some manufacturers are doing like that. But I think he's right, it makes sense to have them equal sized.
Nice, good question, thank you.
The next question is from Niels Shreddit MTB, who says he's got a RockShox Monarch RT3, it's got a lockout. If he locks it out for riding pump tracks, which is something I do as well, it helps you just not lose too much energy. But if he does that and cases the jumps, is that going to be bad for shock? I
mean, it depends a little bit. From my memory, I think that RockShox uses a hydraulic lockout, so it's using damping to lock it out, not spring force.
Yeah.
So effectively, you could blow it up and you ruin your shock.
Really?
Yeah, genuinely, because if you're relying on damping to do something that the spring should be doing, it's not ideal. So that force. I mean, I know some systems would have like a blow-off valve.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about. Will it safely just go? Oh no, it's too much force. I'll let it go. But you wouldn't trust that.
Often, no.
Okay.
And also the damping's not designed. The damping system's not designed to be a sort of a blow-off valve.
Okay.
So it's not designed to do that. So what you could do if you're going down the pump track is take your shock pump, stick loads of air in your suspension.
Okay.
Probably loads in your tyres as well.
Yeah.
That would do a similar thing, but that's using spring instead. So you're preloading the shock with more force to overcome. So that's probably a better way round of doing it. Okay, it's a bit more faffy, but then taking your shock off and getting it serviced is pretty faffy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh well, there we go. So a bit of care and attention with locking it out.
May make your bike last longer, maybe.
Hashtag
Ask GMBN Tech. We've got a good question from Shuza. How do you know when it's time to replace your XE tyres? Is it a certain number of kilometres? Is it a certain amount of time? Is it a season? His or theirs aren't that worn out. The knobs look quite decent, but they've developed some micro cracks and they're not as grippy as they used to be. Thoughts?
I think the key is actually given away in his question at the end, where he says they're not as grippy as they used to be. And if that is the problem, then that's when I would replace them. It's much less on a specific number of kilometres or time or something like that, because you can wear your tyres out in a day on the bike park, or you could look after them for months and months, in different dirt conditions that aren't as abrasive. So it's more when it begins to impact your use. And the micro cracks as well, that's something that can be from extensive UV exposure. So if you're keeping your bike in the light, maybe it's something to think about because that could wear your tyres out prematurely.
Yep.
I've always gone by once it becomes a problem for me. So if the grip isn't a big deal and actually you're finding maybe your tyres roll faster because they're all worn,
Yep.
crack on, as long as you're not getting lots of punctures. I used to change them on my commuting bike because there was a point where suddenly I just get a flat easily and then I change them. So it's thinking about, is this impacting me? Do I want more grippier tyres? And probably going with that is my answer, rather than a specific metric on, oh yeah, I've had them 6 months, I'll change them.
Okay, nice.
Thank you very much for watching today. Thank you for submitting your questions, without which we wouldn't have any to answer, and keep submitting them using the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech. We'll be scraping through those and finding some more questions for next time.